if you all have any questions, and so we can have, you know, more of a dialogue. Like Brother Amir said, my name is Raheemah Abdul-Aleem. I'm initially from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Growing up in a household where my father was an imam, so that meant that, you know, afternoons and weekends and at dinner table discussions were more like mini khutbahs, which it was a really great way to grow up, because I think from an early age, my father really stressed, you know, giving back, service to the community, working for all of humanity. Those were constant topics around the dinner table. So I think growing up, we always knew that it was so important to serve, and that service could take many different forms. And he also stressed that it wasn't just serving a narrow group of people. It wasn't just who was in our community. It was really serving all of humanity, because that's what our religion teaches us. And he really made a point of stressing that issues that were Muslim issues were all issues. Homelessness, healthcare, poverty, that those were issues that we had to be, you know, committed to as Muslims in serving all of our community. And so I always knew that I wanted to have a career that would allow me to do just that. And so I was an attorney in the private sector for many years, and then had an opportunity in 2009 to join the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. And that was a wonderful opportunity, because there I was able to focus on issues related to religious accommodation and discrimination. But one of the things that I focused on was letting people know that I was concerned about all of those issues as they affected all people of religion. It wasn't just Muslim issues, because for me it was important to show that my faith was committed to upholding the tenets of the Constitution and the liberties that are afforded to all of us as Muslims and as other people. And I wanted people to see that we were committed to those issues, so that as allies they could assist us when we needed their assistance. So some of the cases that I had an opportunity to work on when I was at DOJ involved issues of, you know, a Sikh man who wanted to work as a guard in a prison but couldn't because he wore a beard. And for me that was so important, because that was a tenet of his faith. And so if he was being denied that opportunity, then that same issue could present itself for people of other faiths. It could present itself for Muslim men, and also for Jewish men who wore a beard as a tenet of their faith. And alhamdulillah, we were successful in many regards in that case with, you know, establishing greater policies. The same issue came up in Philadelphia. I brought a lawsuit against the school district of Philadelphia that refused to allow a Muslim man to wear a beard. And, you know, once again, we said that we asked and sought an accommodation for him and other men who may need a beard, to wear a beard for their religious beliefs. Oftentimes, these cases, even the cases that involve one person, the goal is to really establish, going forward, policies and procedures that will protect other people of all faiths in the future, so that when they come forward and they have a sincerely held religious belief, that belief will be accommodated. Similarly, when I was at DOJ, I also had the opportunity to bring a case on behalf of a Muslim woman who wanted to go on Hajj. And many times in these cases, the employers had no idea what the tenets of the faith were. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about there being Muslims who are present in all different segments of society, the public sector, the private sector, state and local government, because in this case, my co-counsel and I, we were both Muslim women who worked for DOJ. And it was helpful for us to be at the table and present, because we could explain to people who were non-Muslim why it was important for this woman to be able to go on Hajj when she wanted to. Because she had basically articulated a reasons that she was financially able to go, she was physically able to go, she was spiritually ready to go, and under her belief, she had to go. She had to hasten to the Hajj. She could not wait 3, 4, 5 years. And it was important for us to explain that to people who are non-Muslim, who would say, well, I mean, she's a teacher. She wants to go on Hajj, and that year, Hajj took place around the Thanksgiving holidays. So the school district was like, look, nobody's going on vacation. And we were saying, she's not going on vacation. She's going on Hajj, which is not a vacation. And they said, well, why can't she just wait 5 or 6 years? Hajj will be in the summertime. we're like, no, she can't wait 5 or 6 years, because if she is physically able, financially, spiritually able to go, she believes, and it's supported in Islam, this isn't something she's come up with herself, that she must hasten to the Hajj, because if she passes away, you know, between now and that 6 years from now, she will be held to account for that. So explaining that, having Muslims who were present and able to actually kind of unpack that for people who are non-Muslim was very important. Another issue that came up, I remember, was that the woman, you know, she didn't wear hijab. And so they looked at it and said, well, I mean, she wants to go on Hajj, but she doesn't even wear hijab. And it was important for us to be there to say, let's not mix up, you know, priorities. This woman has a sincerely held religious belief that she should be entitled to go on Hajj. Whether she wears a hijab or not is not the issue that's on the table. And it was important for us to be able to be there to unpack that for people, so people didn't confuse religiosity with a hijab. And so, you know, trying to explain to people that there are many different things that people may do. Some people may wear hijab, some people may not, but that should not at all be part of the calculation of whether an employer is going to give somebody an accommodation to go on Hajj. So that's another story that I think was very important for, you know, Muslims being present and participating fully in government, as attorneys, as leaders, because it helps to really provide a very nuanced understanding of our faith, and also helps to kind of eliminate misconceptions and misunderstandings that many people have about our faith. I think, you know, once we enter the question and answer session, you know, we can talk about how things may be different. Now I'm no longer at the Department of Justice. I moved over to the Executive Office of the President about 1.5 years ago. And over there I have an opportunity to work with the employees and do personnel, personnel security, and hiring, firing, that type of work. And I provide legal guidance in all of those areas. So it's been a wonderful experience there, and it'll be interesting to see how, you know, that type of work, you know, differs coming up.
Alright. Thank you. Alright, assalamu alaikum everybody. Please bear with me because I'm still recovering from a cold.
Oh, you know, and one thing before you start,
Yeah,
just
sorry.
1 more minute.
Yeah, please go.
The views that I spoke about today are my own personal views and not the views of the Office of the President. Sorry.
It's a good segue. So, I will do my best to speak clearly and confidently, although I may be interrupted by coughs and throat clearing. My name is Zaki Al-Barzinji. I have the pleasure of serving the White House, the Office of Public Engagement. The Office of Public Engagement is seen as kind of the front door of the White House, in the sense that every community that exists in this country technically should be able to have a voice and to have access to the White House and to the administration. And it is my office's job to provide that point of access. As I was saying before, over the past 8 years, the President has often engaged the Muslim community over and over again, but there hasn't been kind of a position that was dedicated primarily to the Muslim American community until just this past year. And you could argue that maybe it took a while for that development to happen, but in other ways it's also evidence of the fact that our community needs it now more than ever. Our community needs that access, needs that attention from the administration now more than ever. I'll get back to that. I'll just give you kind of a brief background of my brief history of my own background. I was born in Maryland. I grew up in Northern Virginia. My mom and her family immigrated from Kashmir, from India, you know, decades ago. And my grandfather and my father, from my dad's side, came from Iraq, also decades ago. So I grew up half South Asian, half Arab, which means that I had a nice appreciation of both cultures, but also meant in a lot of ways I never felt fully part of either Arab culture or South Asian culture, which maybe in some ways made me feel more American than anything else. So I was blessed to have both grandfathers from both sides be very involved in institution building in the 60s and 70s here in the U.S. the Muslim Student Association, the Islamic Society of North America, International Institute of Islamic Thought. These are all different organizations and institutions that both my grandparents were a part of and helped build. But my own personal entry into the area of service and public service especially actually came from my mother, who in 2003 decided to run for office. She ran for a local county board of supervisor position in Loudoun County, Virginia. It was very soon after 9/11, of course. It was also in a primarily Republican district. And my mom decided to run as, well, I mean, she didn't decide to run as a Muslim, she was a Muslim. She ran as a Muslim, but also as a Democrat in a primarily heavy Republican district. And the courage that it took for her to do that, to run for a county board position at a time when sentiment towards the community was so strong and negative, truly inspired me. I was a teenager at the time. And so I would go with my mom from door to door, knocking on doors, making phone calls, because that's what you do when you're a politician. You have to get out there and meet everybody that you intend to serve. But I'll never forget one experience in particular where we knocked on someone's door, and the guy opened up the door and, by all appearances, was a kind of person who you wouldn't think would want to have much to do with Muslims. And that was my own prejudice at the time. It was a guy who, he had a Confederate flag hanging behind him, he had like two bulldogs that were growling, he had a scowl on his face, and my mom is a woman who wears hijab, and I, in that moment, I wanted to just be like, hey mom, let's get out of here. No dialogue is going to happen with this constituent. But my mom in that moment refused to back down, refused to run away, refused to say, I'm not going to engage with this person because this person doesn't look like they doesn't look like they want to engage with me. She put her hand out and she said, hey, hello, I'm running to be your supervisor, and I'd love to hear the issues that are on your mind. And the guy took a deep breath, and instead of yelling slurs, he said, well, you know what? What I really want to know is why it's so hard for me to get a fishing license in this county. He said, if you can help me with that issue, you got my vote. And mom was like, okay, I will look into that. Thank you so much, and she shook his hand. And so that taught me at that young age that the power of politics and the power of government to do good, to build bridges, is so strong. And that's not to say that everything was all gravy and rainbows and all that. I mean, there were many other stories during my mom's campaign where people said, oh, I'd vote for her if she just took that thing off her head. There are other folks who said all kinds of, both, Islamophobic things and otherwise. But that experience made it worth it. It made it seem that the power of politics and the power of government to engage communities, to build bridges, is real. And it is worth engaging. It is worth trying and attempting and failing, but then trying again, because ultimately you can yield positive results. So fast forward, when I was in college, I became president of an organization called the Muslim Youth of North America, which is the oldest and largest Muslim organization that serves young Muslims from between the ages of 12 to 18. And I was president after a period of kind of stagnant. Well, the organization hadn't had a president on the national level for about 4 or 5 years. So we had to rebuild an organization for young Muslims, basically from scratch, to establish chapters from around the country. We had to create a space where young Muslims could feel confident in their own identity, both as Muslims and as Americans, and felt free from judgment, both from external forces and also internal forces. Because a lot of times I think what our community does is we set a bar where you have to act and behave in a certain way to be considered a proper Muslim. And that ends up having an alienating effect, especially on young Muslims in our community. And they feel like they're being held to a standard, and that if they cannot achieve that standard, then in some ways they're made to feel like they don't belong in their own communities. So it's very important to me at that time that we create an open space where no matter where you came from, no matter what your background was, no matter what your level of religiosity was, you felt like you had a place. After college, I had the opportunity to work for a Chamber of Commerce, where basically I represented a number of Muslim-owned small businesses in Northern Virginia area. And what we found was that sometimes when you come to the table with policymakers, people in government, and the arguments that you make are economic arguments, sometimes you have more influence that way than you would otherwise. Which is to say, my job was basically to work on policy issues that affect our community, discrimination, civil rights, issues like that. But when I came to the table with policymakers, I said, look, I represent business owners. And some of these policies that are anti-immigrant, anti-diversity, or anti-inclusion, they're not just morally wrong policies, they also don't make sense economically. If I'm trying to create a business, if I'm trying to establish a new business in the state of Virginia, which is where I was working, and it is known that this state has laws that are on the books that are offensive to whole swaths of minorities, why would I want to move my business to Virginia? Why would I want to try to create, it doesn't make economic sense for me to want to establish myself in this state when there are policies like that. And so we found that there are many different avenues for our community to have influence on the system, in government or in the private sector. Sometimes, and often, it's the case that community grassroots organizing is I think the backbone of how our community has influence. But also there are other avenues, like the one that we explored, which was leveraging the business community to make the same arguments but from a different angle. After that, one of the best experiences that I had that really solidified my my commitment to public services, I served on